The 182nd edition of the Roy's Boys podcast starts right now.
Carolina basketball family is the strongest there's ever been. There ever will be.
Nate Humphrey hands King Rice the ball. Pushes into Hubert Davis. 8 seconds. Davis trying to get free. Over to Fox. Fox, baseline. Up for the shot. Good. Off the glass. Oklahoma calls timeout. But the game is over. The game is over. Carolina has upset number 1 Oklahoma. Been ready on his second attempt. That one is no good. They battle for it. Loose ball. Recovered Marvin. He scores.
With 20 seconds left to play. Goes back to Michael Jordan. Jumper from out on the left. Good! 63, 62, 13, 12, 11. Georgetown with one timeout. Brent Brown looking. Throw away to Worthy. 35. The Tar Heels are going to win the national championship. Carolina with foul. He takes the timeout. Technical foul. Technical foul.
Brown gets it into Williams. Here comes Williams front court. Williams on the drive. Gets it back out the head. Long outside shot. Short rebound. It's over. And how about the Tar Heels? They are the national champions.
The Tar Heels are the national daggum champions.
And that's what it takes when you big time games. You got to compete. You do it with your brain, and you got to do it with your heart too. And that's pretty doggone good.
From QCBroadcasting.com, this is the Roy's Boys podcast with your host, Josh Marlowe. Hey everybody, welcome to another edition of the Roy's Boys podcast. We are powered by Carolina Electrical Services. We have a game to talk about. Carolina took to Twitter, believe it or not, to seek out, to find an opponent to come to Chapel Hill and play them after their game against Virginia Tech got postponed due to COVID issues within the Hokies program. It's unclear whether or not Northeastern replied via Twitter or if they saw the tweet and that's what made them reach out. Nonetheless, the Carolina basketball tour is having more success than you and I have had trying to get women on such said Twitter.com, as they'll host Northeastern tomorrow night, 7 o'clock in the Smith Center. And buddy, we're gonna break down the matchup with the Huskies here in a second. But I stressed a lot this last week when the Miami game got postponed, and the same thing after the loss to Virginia on Saturday when we knew the game with Virginia Tech was going to be postponed. Carolina needed to play a game this week. And you could really take the whole coach's cliche. This is just a chance for them to get better. I mean, you want to win the game, but they need to get better, and you only get better if you're actually playing a game and they get a chance to do that tomorrow night.
Yeah, I think this is huge for them to get this game on the schedule. As you mentioned, I mean, you look at the upcoming schedule for the Tar Heels going forward. It's you're running out of games to be able to win. I understand that this isn't going to really help your resume all that much, but what it does is it can give you some momentum as you get ready to go in and play Louisville on Saturday, which is going to be a huge game. That game, along with the Syracuse game at the end of the season, is probably going to be two games that you're going to look back on once the season concludes, and you'll say to yourself, if Carolina makes the tournament or doesn't make the tournament, those were the two games that potentially decided Carolina's tournament fate. I think, especially with what we saw from Florida State last night, that's starting to become more and more realistic. So it's important for Carolina to be able to come out, maybe gain a little confidence from beating a Northeastern team that is a solid mid-major, but is not even leading their conference. It's, a team that's bordering on 500 and really struggled out of conference prior to this game that they're going to play on Wednesday night. So I think it sets up well for Carolina to have a lot of success, to potentially get a nice win here, get yourself feeling good before you then have to turn around and play a tough conference game.
Yeah, that game against Louisville is really going to determine, I think, how this season ends up going for Carolina. You win that game, you're still probably on the right track to make the NCAA tournament. If you lose that game, your bubble life becomes even that much more, suppressed, because even though that game right now is not going to shape up as a quad one chance for Carolina to get a win on their schedule, it is still going to be a pretty big game for the Tar Heels. You look at Northeastern, this is a team a lot like Carolina, haven't played a whole lot recently because of COVID. They've had 4 games since the end of January and the first part of February that were postponed due to COVID issues within their program. As you mentioned it, solid mid-major, 9-7 overall, 8-2 in the Colonial, but as you said, they're not leading their conference. So I think these two teams, it made a lot of sense for both of them to play each other because they simply just want to get on the court to try to get their teams better because the conference tournaments are going to be really important for both teams. And you were talking about this last night. I know last week I said that Carolina shouldn't compete in the ACC tournament if they have it, if their NCAA tournament standing is in good shape. I think they're going to need the ACC tournament to solidify their NCAA tournament standing. So you're looking at Northeastern, and it's the thing you're going to expect when you play against even an above-average mid-major. They're going to want to slow the game down. They're going to take a lot of threes, and if they make a lot of threes, they have a chance to beat you. Bill Cohen's been there for 15 years. He's had a lot of, he's a very experienced head coach. He's actually tied for the most wins in that program's history with Jim Calhoun, who was there before he went on to Connecticut and ultimately won 3 national championships. Looking at their stats, they put 4 guys in double-figure scoring, led by Tyson Walker and his 18 points per game. Shaquille Walters has 11. And so this is a team that only averages, though, 67.8 points per game and only give up 68.4. They're going to play a more methodical style. They're not going to try to get up and down the floor with Carolina, even though this Carolina team doesn't run like Carolina teams that we're used to. But this, when you're looking at this game, as I try to, we've mentioned this all the time during the non-conference part of our schedule, this is about Carolina doing what Carolina needs to do to get better and then win games.
Yeah, I mean, look, this is a solid, like you said, like I said, and you repeated, solid mid-major team. For them, I mean, you're looking at, if they can win this game, that would be great. That'd be a huge upset for them. That could potentially, get them in good standing in terms of seeding if they were able to win that conference. But that's the main thing for them, is even if you don't win this game, they're going to be looking to come out and play well to try to get themselves back to feeling good after they suffered. I forget who they played in their last game. Townsend, and lost that game, a game that most people didn't think they were going to lose, that took them out of first place in their conference. So this is one where they're going to try to build up a little bit of momentum, get themselves feeling good so that they can try to make a run at their conference title. Carolina's in a little bit of a different situation. I just mentioned, look, they're not going to be playing for a conference title, but at the same time, there's a lot on the line for the Tar Heels in this game, starting with the Louisville game, really. But I still feel like there is something on the line here in this game even, which is, getting yourself back into rhythm. And I feel like you have to come away from this game feeling good about how you played in this game. I'm going to be concerned if I come away and I say, well, they didn't really play that great, but they found a way to win. You should, because you are easily the most talented team. This team is not deep. One area, they should dominate this team on the glass. This team is not a good rebounding team. They average 32.8 per game, and that ranks 294th in the country. So Carolina should have a huge advantage there. But as you mentioned, this team does one thing that Carolina has struggled to defend, which is shoot the three rather well. They're inside the top 100 in the country in three-point shooting. So I think overall, it's actually a really good test for Carolina on the defensive end.
Yeah.
But I do think that this is still a game that you shouldn't have much problem being able to win and getting yourself in the rhythm that you need to be able to close out the conference season the way you want to.
Yeah, this isn't like when they played North Carolina Central back in early December, and Carolina, didn't play well in that game, but they won the game, and at that time, that's what matters. What matters now is, yes, winning, but how you're winning. And, when Carolina won at Duke, the last time they won a ball game, they looked really good in that game on the offensive end of the court. There are 2 losses, before that game and then after that game. Their offense scored 50 points and 48 points against Clemson and Virginia, respectively. Now, granted, 2 really, really good defensive teams, but you should still be being more effective offensively than they were in those games. So I'm with you. I think this is a game that Carolina's got to come out and they've got to play. They got to play well for us to enter that game against Louisville with some confidence. They can beat one of the top half teams in the ACC on their home court. And so with that, if we're talking about this team needs to play well and they're going to look good winning, who's that start with? And it starts with your point guard play. It starts with that backcourt, which is it's just been up and down all year long. But, I've had a couple guests on here in the last couple weeks, and they've all said about how far behind Carolina is because they didn't have the normal preseason. They didn't have the normal non-conference season. Well, Carolina's already now lost 3 ACC games due to COVID. Right now, they're only paced to play 17 conference games.
Right, not played them.
Right.
Yeah.
And so how much has that affected Carolina right now? We can't really tell you. In terms of we can't prove to you that having all these games postponed has hurt them, but I can also tell you that it has, because if they were playing more,
right,
they would be getting better.
I think you're right. Mainly when you look at the freshmen, I think that's the ones that it's affected the most for sure. It definitely doesn't help because look, even you compare this matchup to the game against Miami. Playing Miami probably would have been a better challenge for your team. Mm-hmm. Probably would have been seen as a better resume win. Now again, neither one of these wins you're going to hang your hat on for the NCAA tournament. That's just not going to happen. You're going to have to beat, as I mentioned, either Syracuse or Louisville, preferably probably both of those teams. But I feel like, the cancellation of these games, I think the biggest one is the cancellation of that game against Clemson at home. If they would have been able to come out and win that game, you're probably feeling a little more comfortable about where Carolina is right now. That would honestly probably be one of their better wins. It's probably either that or the win against Pittsburgh. Mm-hmm. So it's a tough situation for these guys to be in. And look, anybody that doesn't think that this has had any effect on this team and just says, look, this is COVID, they should just be able to get through it, you're playing yourself. This is, you've got to be able to sort of navigate this. This is part of what the landscape is now with college basketball during COVID-19. But at the same time, it has an effect on these guys. It has an effect on the rhythm of the team.
Yeah, I feel like, you can play football really well and not have games consecutively. I feel like basketball is a sport that you've got to play consistently to get into. We saw Carolina football this year come out and have a couple of delays and still like a really effective team. Carolina, especially, you've got 7 freshmen in your rotation. Mm-hmm. 7. And that includes Anthony Harris, who was technically a freshman because of the medical red shirt from a year ago. So them not being on the court every 2 to 3 days in game action has hindered their development more than you would imagine. Now, people say, well, they should be getting better in practice, and they are, but you get better when you're playing against other teams. Yeah. And so I think that's the thing for Carolina. I think that's why Roy Williams was very adamant in his Monday press conference availability, saying, look, we're going to try to find a way to play this game. And that's why, look, they got clowned for taking to Twitter, but that's how important it is for this team to get on the court and just play ball.
Yeah, anybody that criticizes them for adding this game to the schedule, I don't really know what to say to you. Look, this team is, as you mentioned, they've had, this is their 5th game, their 6th game that's been postponed by COVID-19. So they haven't played as much as they would have liked to. With football, you brought that up. Look, with football, if you have a game canceled 1 week and you come back after 2 weeks, it's not really that big of a deal because you have 1 week off in between games anyways, so that's not huge. Now, the 1 month layoff that Carolina had in football from the Syracuse game to the Boston College game, now that was significant because we saw it when they came out against Boston College. They did not look great for most of that game, but found a way to win that game. For Carolina basketball, they're sort of in that similar situation, but they've been there multiple times because basketball, especially baseball, even, which they don't have a competitive team on campus. It's what do they call that? Intramural team, the hockey team. Those sports, you play multiple times in a week. And when you don't play when you're playing with 1 week in between and all you're doing is just practicing between you, it definitely ruins your rhythm. And I think that's what we've seen with Carolina. But at the same time, look, there's other teams that have gone through it. There's really no excuse. And I think, the most important thing that Carolina has to do, especially if they're going to play in that ACC tournament, is they got to use this game to build some momentum so that they can get a little bit of better seeding, because it's going to go off of winning percentage. It doesn't matter how many conference wins you have, so you don't have to be concerned about that, but it's about your winning percentage that'll determine ultimately who you end up playing and whether or not that'll be a tougher or easier road for you.
I think another reason why this is a really big game for this team, or why they were so hell-bent on playing a game, Carolina